Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the marble doorway of an ancient Roman bathhouse, where steam rises in lazy spirals and voices echo off mosaic walls. You're about to discover a civilization that built aqueducts spanning hundreds of miles, engineered heated floors beneath public toilets, and debated philosophy while sitting shoulder to shoulder on communal bathroom seats. The strange hygiene secrets of ancient Rome will reveal practices so alien to our modern sensibilities that you'll wonder how anyone survived. And yet, these same Romans conquered most of the known world while sharing sponges and bathing in rooms with hundreds of strangers. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why bathroom humour has been around for thousands of years, or why the word lavatory connects to washing. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, whether you're tucked into bed in Tokyo or winding down in Toronto, and let me know if you've ever wondered what ancient people did before toilet paper was invented. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You're walking through the streets of Rome in the year 150 CE, and your bladder is uncomfortably full. The afternoon sun beats down on cobblestones worn smooth by a million sandaled feet, and you're searching for relief. Modern you might look for a cafe bathroom or a public restroom with a locked door, but Roman you knows exactly where to go. The foraker, the public latrine that serves your neighbourhood. You push through the entrance, and instead of the private stalls you're used to, you find a long room with marble benches running along 3 walls. Cut into these benches are keyhole-shaped holes, spaced about 2 feet apart, and sitting on nearly every hole is a Roman citizen going about their business with the casual ease of someone sitting in a cafe. You take your place on an empty seat, and immediately the person next to you, a merchant in a wine-stained tunic, continues his conversation about grain prices without missing a beat. There are no doors, no partitions, no courtesy of pretending that everyone isn't doing exactly what they're doing. The Romans simply don't care. In fact, they prefer it this way. The latrine is a social space, somewhere between a modern water cooler and a community centre, where business deals are discussed, gossip is exchanged, and friendships are maintained. You might think this communal approach to bodily functions would be the strangest part of Roman toilet culture, but you'd be wrong. The truly bizarre details are just beginning. Beneath the marble seats where you're sitting, a channel of flowing water runs continuously, carrying waste away through an ingenious system of sewers that empty into the Tiber River. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, is so large that a person could walk through it standing upright, and it's been functioning for centuries already by the time you visit. This is mainstream history, Roman engineering at its finest, a genuine achievement that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. But here's the quirky detail that historians love to mention. At the front of the latrine, near your feet, another shallow channel runs with clean water. This channel serves a very specific purpose, and you're about to discover what it is. You finish your business, and now comes the moment that separates ancient Roman hygiene from everything you know. There's no toilet paper. Paper is far too expensive for such a purpose, and besides, the Romans have a different solution entirely. You reach for the stick sitting in the channel of clean water at your feet. It's a wooden stick about 2 feet long, and attached to one end is a natural sea sponge. This is the tussorium, and you're about to use it for the most intimate cleaning imaginable. Except here's the truly shocking part, this sponge isn't yours, it's everyone's. The same sponge you're about to use was just used by the merchant beside you, and before him, by the baker who left a few minutes ago, and before her, by a dozen other Romans going about their daily constitutional of the fedora. Historians still argue whether Romans rinsed the tussorium in the flowing channel between uses, or if they rinsed it in vinegar or salt water kept in pots for that purpose. The archaeological evidence is frustratingly incomplete on this point, and the ancient texts that mention the tool don't specify the exact hygiene protocol. What we do know is that the Romans saw nothing wrong with this arrangement. In a culture where you bathed naked with hundreds of strangers, where you conducted business while sitting on a toilet, and where privacy was a luxury most people never experienced, sharing a bathroom sponge was perfectly normal. You rinse the tussorium in the channel, return it to its place, arrange your toga, and head back into the sunlight, ready to continue your day. The public latrines weren't free, though. You paid a small fee to use them, which helped maintain the facilities and kept the water flowing. The very wealthy, of course, had private latrines in their homes, connected to the same sewer system, but even they often preferred to use the public facilities for the social opportunities they provided. In a world without social media, coffee shops, or office break rooms, the latrine served an important function beyond the obvious one. It was a place where you could catch up on news, make connections, and feel part of your community. The lack of privacy we'd find mortifying was, to the Romans, a feature rather than a bug. Some Romans even believed that evil spirits could emerge from the sewers through the toilet holes, rising up to attack the most vulnerable parts of your anatomy. This wasn't an official religious belief, but rather a folk superstition that many people held. To ward off these demons, Romans would sometimes carry amulets or mutter protective prayers before sitting down. The god Cloacina, whose name derives from the same root as Cloaca Maxima, was invoked for protection in these vulnerable moments. The Romans might have been engineering geniuses who built an empire, but they were still people with fears and superstitions, trying to make sense of a world where invisible forces seem to control health and fortune. The tussorium haunts modern minds in ways the Romans would never understand. You're holding this communal sponge stick, this artifact that appears in archaeological digs and ancient texts, and you're trying to reconcile it with everything you know about germs, bacteria, and personal hygiene. But here's what you need to remember. The Romans don't know about germs. They won't for another 18 centuries. What they do know is that cleanliness feels good, that certain practices keep you healthier than others, and that sharing resources is simply how civilized people live. The tussorium isn't disgusting to them. It's practical, efficient, and perfectly normal. You're standing in a museum now, looking at one of the few surviving examples of a tussorium, and you notice the craftsmanship. The wooden handle is smooth, worn by countless hands over decades of use. The sponge itself, of course, has long since disintegrated, but you can see where it was attached. Natural sea sponges were the preferred material because they're soft, absorbent, and remarkably durable when kept moist. The Romans harvested them from the Mediterranean, and sponge diving was a respected profession that supplied bathhouses, latrines, and wealthy households across the empire. These weren't the synthetic kitchen sponges, you know. They were living organisms, their skeletons creating the perfect texture for cleaning skin. The debate among historians about tussorium hygiene protocols is genuinely fascinating. Some scholars point to mentions in ancient texts of vinegar or salt water being used as disinfectants. Vinegar, you might know, actually does have antibacterial properties, though the Romans didn't understand why it worked. They just knew from experience that vinegar-clean things seemed cleaner and less likely to cause problems. Other historians argue that the continuous flow of water in the channel at the front of the latrine was sufficient to rinse the sponge between uses, especially if the water came fresh from the aqueducts. Still others suggest that each person might have brought their own sponge, carrying it in a container of salt water, though this theory has less archaeological support. Here's a quirky detail that makes the whole situation even stranger. The tussorium appears in ancient Roman jokes and insults. There's a famous story about a gladiator who, rather than face certain death in the arena, took his own life using a tussorium, shoving it down his throat. The historian who recorded this event described it as both tragic and darkly humorous, which tells you something about Roman attitudes toward both death and bathroom equipment. The Tussorium also appears in graffiti found in Pompeii, in crude jokes that wouldn't be out of place in a modern bathroom stall, proving that bathroom humour has been part of human culture for at least 2,000 years. You're trying to imagine the practical logistics now. The latrine is busy, maybe 20 or 30 people using it at once during peak hours after the bathhouse or the public games. There might be several Tussoria stationed around the room, floating in their respective channels, and you'd simply reach for the nearest one. The social contract was clear. You used it, you rinsed it, you left it for the next person. Breaking this contract using the Tussorium incorrectly or carelessly would have been a serious breach of etiquette, the kind of thing that would mark you as uncivilized, as someone who didn't understand how proper Romans behaved. Historians still argue whether the Tussorium was used dry or wet, whether people rinsed themselves with water from the channel first, or whether the sponge alone was considered sufficient. The archaeological evidence is maddeningly vague on these details. What we do have are fragments of medical texts that mention hemorrhoids and other rectal ailments, suggesting that Roman doctors were very familiar with problems that might arise from, shall we say, aggressive wiping techniques. One physician recommended olive oil as a treatment for irritation, which might suggest that dry sponging was indeed the norm. Another prescribed sitting in warm herbal baths, which sounds remarkably sensible even by modern standards. The really mind-bending part is that this system worked for centuries. The Roman Empire lasted for over 1,000 years if you count the Byzantine continuation, and throughout all that time, people shared bathroom sponges and somehow society didn't collapse. They didn't have pandemics wiping out populations every year from bathroom-transmitted diseases. They didn't have public health crises forcing the government to mandate private wiping implements. Yes, Romans certainly dealt with intestinal parasites and various unpleasant conditions, but these were endemic to the era regardless of bathroom practices. The Tussorium, strange as it seems to you lying in your bed tonight, was just one small part of daily life in a civilization that thrived. Some wealthy Romans did use wool or linen cloths for personal cleaning, especially in their private home latrines. These cloths would be washed by servants and reused, which might strike you as slightly less disturbing than sharing a communal sponge, though the concept still makes modern germaphobes shudder. The very poorest Romans, meanwhile, might have used broken pieces of pottery called pessoi, smooth ceramic shards that served the purpose without costing anything. Archaeological excavations of latrines have turned up these pottery fragments, worn smooth at the edges, and historians debate whether they were deliberate tools or just convenient trash. Imagine explaining to someone from ancient Rome that you use soft paper, made from trees, a precious resource, for this purpose, and then you flush it away into clean drinking water. They'd think you were absolutely insane. The Tussorium represents something larger than just a bathroom tool. It's a window into a completely different way of thinking about the body, about privacy, about what's public and what's private. You live in a world where even family members often won't use each other's towels, where personal space and individual items are sacrosanct. The Romans lived in a world where bodies were public, where nudity was unremarkable, where sharing was the default setting for almost everything. The Tussorium wasn't an aberration in their culture. It was perfectly consistent with how they approached all aspects of hygiene and daily life. You push open the heavy bronze doors of the baths of Caracalla, and the sound hits you first. Echoes of laughter, splashing water, and hundreds of conversations bouncing off vaulted ceilings that soar overhead like a cathedral. The air is thick with steam and scented oils, and as your eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through high windows, you realize you've entered something far more than a place to get clean. This is the social heart of Rome, a complex covering 27 acres, with room for 1,600 bathers at a time. You've just stepped into the most important daily ritual of Roman life, and nothing in your modern experience has prepared you for what bathing meant to these ancient people. The thermae, as the Romans call their grand public bathhouses, are architectural marvels that wouldn't be matched in scale until the modern era. The baths of Caracalla, where you're standing, required the labour of 9,000 workers labouring for 5 years to complete. The building contains not just bathing rooms, but libraries, gardens, art galleries, exercise yards, and food vendors. Romans don't just come here to wash. They come to spend half their day engaging in the full spectrum of social life. The entrance fee is minimal, sometimes just a quadrans, the smallest coin in circulation, specifically so that even the poorest citizens can participate in this essential aspect of Roman culture. The emperor who provides free or cheap bathing to the people earns their loyalty and love. You follow the flow of people through the apoditerium, the changing room, where you strip off your tunic and leave it with an attendant. Everyone is naked now, from the senator to the street sweeper, and this democratic nudity is part of the point. In the baths, social distinctions blur. Not completely, the wealthy still get better service and prime spots, but enough that a merchant might find himself discussing philosophy with a magistrate, both of them equally unclothed, equally vulnerable, equally human. This is mainstream historical fact. The Roman bathhouse was one of the few places where the rigid social hierarchy of Roman society became somewhat permeable, where connections could be made across class lines that would be impossible anywhere else. Your bathing journey follows a prescribed route, a ritual refined over centuries. You begin in the palestra, the exercise yard, where men wrestle, lift weights made of stone, or play ball games to work up a good sweat. The Romans believed that bathing without first exercising is pointless. You need to open your pores, get your blood flowing, make your body ready to release its impurities. Women have their own bathing hours or separate facilities, following the same general routine but in their own spaces. The exercise is vigorous enough that dust from the yard mixes with your sweat, coating your skin in a gritty layer. This isn't an accident. It's exactly what you want. Next you enter the tepidarium, the warm room, where the temperature hovers around body heat and your muscles begin to relax. The floors are heated by the hypercore system, one of Rome's cleverest inventions, a space beneath the floor where hot air from furnaces circulates, radiating warmth upward through the tiles. You can feel it through your bare feet, a gentle, consistent heat that makes the whole room comfortable without being overwhelming. The walls are heated too, creating an envelope of warmth that penetrates deep into your bones. You're not bathing yet, just sitting, talking with friends, allowing your body to adjust gradually to the heat. Romans believe sudden temperature changes are dangerous to health, so they move through the bathing sequence slowly, deliberately, giving each stage its proper time. Historians still argue whether men and women ever bathed together in the same facilities at the same times. Some emperors explicitly banned mixed bathing, which suggests it must have been happening for them to bother forbidding it. Other evidence suggests that mixed bathing was considered scandalous, a sign of moral decay that decent people avoided. The truth probably varied by location, time period, and local custom. In some smaller provincial bathhouses, men and women might have used the same facilities at different hours. In the grand urban thermae, separate but parallel facilities were more common. What's certain is that Romans spent enormous amounts of time thinking, talking and writing about proper bathing etiquette. From the tepidarium, you move into the caldarium, the hot room, and the heat here is intense. Steam rises from pools of hot water, condensing on the marble walls and ceiling, dripping back down in a constant gentle rain. You're sweating profusely now, your skin flushed and glowing, every pore open and releasing. Some Romans believe this sweating purges toxins from the body, that the heat draws out illness and bad humours through the skin. They're not entirely wrong. Sweating does help regulate body temperature and flush out certain waste products, though not in the mystical way Romans imagine. You lower yourself into the hot pool, and the water is almost scalding, heated by the same hypocaust system that warms the floors. You can only stay in for a few minutes before you need to get out and cool down. Here's a quirky detail that brings the whole experience to life. Bathhouses employed specialised slaves called capsarii, whose sole job was to guard bathers' clothing and belongings in the changing room. These capsarii had a reputation for being the most dishonest slaves in Rome, constantly suspected of theft despite the specific trust placed in them. Romans going to the baths would often leave their valuables at home and bring only what they absolutely needed, knowing that even with guards watching, theft was common. Some wealthy Romans brought their own slaves to watch their belongings, creating a redundant security system. The bathhouse was a place of relaxation, but also of constant vigilance against pickpockets and thieves. After the caldarium, you make your way to the frigidarium, the cold room, where a shock of cool water awaits. Some Romans dive directly into the cold pool from the hot room, believing the sudden contrast strengthens the body. Others ease into it gradually, splashing cool water on their face and chest first. The cold is bracing, invigorating, and makes your skin tingle. Your blood vessels constrict, your breathing quickens, and you feel more alive than you have all day. This alternation between hot and cold, between sweating and cooling, is the core of Roman bathing philosophy. It's not about getting clean in the way you think of cleanliness. It's about transformation, about putting your body through a process that leaves you feeling renewed. The bathhouse is never quiet. Voices echo constantly, and the Roman poet Seneca, who once lived above a bathhouse, wrote complaints about the noise that resonate across 2 millennia. He described the grunts of weightlifters, the slap of the masseur's hands on flesh, the splash of people jumping into pools, the cries of food vendors, the shouts of people having their armpit hair plucked. Yes, plucked. Wealthy Romans employed slaves called alipili, who removed body hair by hand, one painful hair at a time, and their customers' yelps of pain added to the general cacophony. You're walking past a row of enormous ceramic jars lining a side street in Rome, and the smell hits you before you see what's inside. Each jar stands waist high, and each one is collecting urine. Not as waste, but as a valuable commodity that people are actively contributing to throughout the day. There's even a small coin slot built into the wall next to some of these vessels, because the Emperor Vespasian imposed a tax on urine collection, and when his son complained about the disgusting nature of the tax, Vespasian held up a gold coin and asked, "Does this smell?" The phrase pecunia non olet, money doesn't smell, has echoed through history ever since, a reminder that Romans found profit in places you'd never imagine looking. The fullers, the ancient equivalent of dry cleaners, are the primary customers for all this collected urine. You watch as workers from the fullonica, the fulling workshop, arrive with carts to collect the jars and transport them back to their establishment. Inside the workshop, you'd find large vats where togas and tunics soak in aged urine that's been sitting long enough for the urea to break down into ammonia. The ammonia is a powerful degreaser and whitener, capable of removing the oils, sweat and dirt that accumulate in wool fabric. This is mainstream historical fact. Roman laundry depended on urine the way modern laundry depends on detergent, and the industry was so important that fullers had their own guild, their own patron deity, and considerable political influence in Roman cities. The process is even stranger than just soaking clothes in pee. Fullers employ workers who climb into the vats barefoot and literally stomp on the soaking garments, treading them like grapes in a wine press. The urine squishes between their toes as they work, and they spend hours each day performing this task, their legs stained yellow up to the knees. The Romans call this jumping the cloth, and it's considered skilled labour because the rhythm and pressure have to be just right to clean without damaging the fabric. After the urine bath and the treading, the clothes are rinsed in clean water, sometimes treated with sulphur to bleach them even whiter, and then stretched on frames to dry in the sun. But the truly bizarre applications of urine don't stop at laundry. You're visiting a wealthy Roman woman now, watching her morning beauty routine, and a slave brings out a container of what the woman cheerfully calls Portuguese urine, which is apparently the finest quality available. She's about to use it as mouthwash. You're not hallucinating. Romans genuinely believed that urine, particularly urine imported from Portugal for reasons that remain mysterious, was an excellent whitener for teeth. The ammonia does actually have some antibacterial and whitening properties, though the taste must have been absolutely horrific. The poet Catullus mocked a Spanish acquaintance for having bright white teeth, suggesting that the brightness came from the Spanish habit of using their own urine as mouthwash, the implication being that this was a disgusting provincial practice that sophisticated Romans would never engage in, except, of course, they did. Historians still argue whether urine mouthwash was genuinely widespread, or whether the literary references were exaggerated for comedic effect. The archaeological evidence can't tell us how many Romans actually swished pee around their mouths each morning, versus how many just laughed at the idea in satirical poetry. What's certain is that the concept was familiar enough to Romans that writers could reference it and expect their audiences to understand the joke. Medical texts from the period do mention urine as a treatment for various ailments, including mouth sores and toothaches, which suggests at least some physicians recommended the practice. The collection system for urine was surprisingly organised. The public urinals, sometimes just large jars set into street corners, were positioned strategically throughout the city. Some were sheltered by small structures, others were completely exposed to the street. Men would relieve themselves while standing. Women rarely used these public vessels, and the jars would be collected regularly by fullers or their agents. The whole system represents a kind of early recycling program, turning human waste into an industrial resource. Modern sewage systems dispose of urine as waste, treating it as a problem to be eliminated, but Romans saw it as valuable, something to be harvested and put to work. Here's a quirky detail that makes the whole situation even more Roman. The physician Pliny the Elder, in his massive Encyclopedia Natural History, lists dozens of medical uses for urine. He claims it cures scorpion stings, heals wounds, treats ear infections, softens hard skin, and even prevents baldness if massaged into the scalp. He recommends using your own urine when possible, as it's more specifically attuned to your personal constitution. But he also notes that the urine of eunuchs is particularly effective for certain conditions because their humours are balanced differently. Pliny was a serious scholar, an admiral in the Roman navy, and his encyclopedia was considered authoritative for over 1,000 years. The fact that it's filled with bizarre medical advice about urine tells you how differently Romans understood the human body and its byproducts. You're in a tannery now, watching leather being processed, and once again urine plays a starring role. The tanners soak animal hides in vats of urine mixed with other substances, using the ammonia to help remove hair and break down proteins in the skin. The smell is overwhelming, a combination of rotting flesh, urine, and the lime and other chemicals used in the process. Tanneries are always located on the outskirts of cities because no one wants to live near them, but they're essential to the empire. Leather is needed for shoes, armour, shields, tents, book bindings, and countless other applications. The tanner wading through a vat of urine and half-processed hide is providing a crucial service, even if respectable Romans hold their noses when they pass his workshop. The economic importance of urine collection meant that controlling it could be profitable. Vespasian's urine tax was controversial, not because collecting urine was considered disgusting. Romans were pragmatic about such things, but because it represented imperial overreach into private business. The fullers resented paying tax on something they'd been collecting freely for generations, but Vespasian needed revenue to rebuild Rome after the civil wars, and he understood that taxing an established industry was easier than creating a new one. The public urinals, once simple convenience facilities, became taxable infrastructure overnight. Some historians calculate that the urine tax brought in substantial revenue, though exact figures don't survive. The whole system reveals something fundamental about Roman attitudes toward the body and its products. You're taught from childhood that bodily waste is disgusting, something to be hidden and disposed of as quickly as possible. Romans saw these same substances as neutral resources, neither good nor bad in themselves, but potentially useful if applied correctly. Urine wasn't shameful. It was ammonia before chemistry existed to extract ammonia from other sources. This practical, unsqueamish approach to bodily functions extended to other areas of Roman life as well, creating a culture that seems simultaneously sophisticated and shockingly crude to modern eyes. You're sitting at the dressing table of a wealthy Roman matron, and the array of containers, jars, and mysterious substances spread before you would make a modern cosmetics counter look restrained. The slave girl attending her mistress opens a small pot containing white powder, lead carbonate, ground so fine it feels like silk between your fingers. She mixes it with chalk and applies it to the woman's face in smooth, even strokes, creating the pale complexion that signals wealth and status. The paler your skin, the clearer the message. You don't work outdoors, you don't labour in the sun, you're important enough to stay sheltered and pristine. What you're watching is slowly poisoning this woman, though neither she nor anyone else in the room knows it. Lead accumulates in the body over years, causing neurological damage, infertility, and eventual death. But that knowledge won't exist for centuries yet. The pursuit of beauty in ancient Rome is a full-time occupation for wealthy women, and the standards are exacting. Pale skin, rosy cheeks, dark eyes, and minimal body hair, these are the markers of feminine beauty, and achieving them requires an arsenal of substances that range from the merely unpleasant to the actively toxic. After the lead white foundation comes the rouge, made from red ochre or wine dregs, applied to the cheeks and lips to provide that healthy glow that the pale foundation has erased. Then comes eye makeup, soot or antimony for darkening the eyelids, saffron for colouring them golden. Every step in this process has been refined over generations, passed down from mother to daughter, shared among friends at the bathhouse, discussed in hushed tones as if makeup application were a sacred mystery. Hair presents its own set of challenges and solutions. The fashionable woman you're observing has dark hair, which is currently in style, but last decade blonde was all the rage, inspired by Germanic captives brought to Rome, whose golden hair fascinated the city. To achieve blonde hair, Roman women apply a paste made from, and you should brace yourself for this, goat fat and beechwood ash. The mixture is left on overnight, and the alkaline ash gradually lightens the hair, though it also damages it badly, leaving it brittle and prone to breaking. Some women go further using quicklime, a caustic substance that burns the hair lighter but also burns the scalp. Historians still argue whether the famous golden hair of some Roman beauties described in poetry was natural, dyed, or simply the result of wearing wigs made from the hair of blonde slaves. Here's where things get truly strange. For women whose hair won't cooperate with dyes, or whose hair has been damaged by too much chemical treatment, there's another option. You watch as the slave brings out a wig, and when you ask what it's made from, she explains cheerfully that it came from a German slave woman who was shorn when she arrived in Rome. The market for human hair is substantial. Blonde hair from Germanic tribes, black hair from eastern provinces, red hair from Gauls, all carefully collected, cleaned, and woven into wigs for wealthy Romans who want to change their look without damaging their natural hair. Some women own multiple wigs, changing their hair colour to match their mood or their outfit, a practice that seems remarkably modern until you remember these wigs are attached using pins, combs, and occasionally a mixture of resin that must be absolutely miserable to remove. But the most disturbing beauty secret is what Romans use when they can't get proper hair dye. Medical texts and personal letters reference a substance used to darken grey hair and create rich black tones, a mixture that includes leeches that have been left to rot in wine for 60 days, then applied to the hair. The Roman naturalist Pliny, your friend from earlier sections, also recommends mouse brains boiled in vinegar as a hair darkening treatment, though he notes that the smell is particularly offensive. You're lying in bed tonight wondering how desperate someone would have to be to boil mouse brains and spread them on their head. But for a Roman woman watching her hair grey as she ages, knowing that beauty and social value are intimately connected, the answer is desperate enough. Skincare goes beyond just foundation. You're watching as the slave prepares a face mask from ingredients that make you want to look away. She's mixing crocodile dung, imported at great expense from Egypt, with various oils and herbs. The logic behind this particular beauty treatment is lost to time, though some historians speculate that the texture of crocodile dung when dried and powdered provided good exfoliation. Other face masks include ingredients like placenta from various animals, snail slime, swan fat and honey mixed with crushed almonds. The honey and almonds actually make sense by modern standards. Both have beneficial properties for skin, but they're mixed with so many bizarre additions that any benefit is likely coincidental. Depilatory creams represent another frontier in Roman beauty technology, and the ingredients are nightmarish. To remove unwanted body hair, women apply pastes made from resin, pitch, quicklime, arsenic, and various plant extracts. The mixture burns off the hair along with the top layer of skin, leaving chemical burns that take days to heal. The pain must be excruciating, but smooth, hairless skin is the standard, and wealthy women endure this regularly. Some opt instead for the services of the Allipoli mentioned earlier, the hair-plucking slaves who remove hair by hand, which is perhaps even more painful but at least doesn't involve poisoning your skin with arsenic. Historians still argue whether the Roman obsession with hair removal was aesthetic, practical in a hot climate, or related to cleanliness beliefs that associated body hair with barbarism. Here's a quirky detail that humanizes these ancient beauty rituals. Love letters and poems survive from Roman times, where men complain about how long their wives or girlfriends take to get ready. One grumpy husband writes that his wife begins her beauty routine before dawn and still isn't ready when he returns home in the afternoon. Another poet jokes that his girlfriend is so assembled from various products and prosthetics that he's not sure what parts of her are actually real. Her hair might be from Germany, her teeth might be ivory replacements, her pale skin might be an inch of lead paint. These complaints could come from any era, the eternal tension between personal grooming standards and other people's patience. Perfume represents the final layer in Roman beauty construction, and you will explore that more deeply soon. But for now, note that these women don't just apply a spritz of scent before leaving the house. They're layered in it, soaked in it, their clothes stored with aromatic herbs, their hair oiled with perfumed unguents. The goal is to be perceived from across a room by scent alone, to leave a trail of fragrance that announces your presence even after you've left. When you combine the lead-white face, the rouged cheeks, the darkened eyes, the elaborate wig, and the cloud of perfume, the wealthy Roman woman becomes almost a construction, a living artwork that bears little resemblance to the human underneath. You're standing in the palaestra again, the exercise yard attached to the bathhouse, and you've just finished your workout. Your skin is covered in a mixture of sweat, dust from the sandy ground, and the olive oil you rubbed all over your body before exercising. Yes, you read that correctly. Before exercising, not after. Romans coat themselves in oil the way you might apply sunscreen, and now that you're thoroughly exercised and dirty, the real cleaning process can begin. A slave approaches with what looks like a curved metal blade, almost like a small sickle but with a dull edge. This is the strigil, and what's about to happen will revolutionize your understanding of what it means to get clean. The slave begins at your shoulder, pressing the strigil against your oiled skin and dragging it downward in firm, smooth strokes. The oil, sweat and dirt come away in a yellowish-brown sludge that collects in the curved blade. Scrape, 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 down your arms, across your back, along your legs. The sound is distinctive, a kind of squeaking scrape that echoes through the bathhouse, mixing with hundreds of other strigils working on hundreds of other bodies. This is how Romans get clean. Not with soap, which exists, but is considered a strange Germanic invention used mainly for hair. Not with scrubbing cloths or sponges, with oil and a metal scraper, systematically removing the top layer of whatever's on their skin. The logic behind this practice makes sense once you understand it. Olive oil is a solvent that dissolves the natural oils in your skin, along with any dirt, sweat or grime attached to them. By coating yourself in oil and then scraping it away, you're essentially performing the same chemical process that soap achieves, just more mechanically. The oil binds with the dirt and the strigil removes both together. Romans have been doing this for so long that they've perfected the technique. The angle of the strigil, the pressure required, the order in which you scrape different body parts. It's an art form, really, and skilled slaves who excel at strigiling are highly valued. Historians still argue whether Romans applied oil before or after exercising, or perhaps both. Some sources suggest oil was applied beforehand to protect the skin from sun and dust. Other texts imply it was applied afterward, specifically for the cleaning process. The truth is probably that practices varied. Wealthier people might use different oils at different stages, while poorer Romans used whatever olive oil they could afford and applied it whenever it made sense. What's certain is that the combination of oil and strigil was the Roman cleaning method, as fundamental to their hygiene as soap and water are to yours. The scraped-off mixture of oil, sweat and dirt isn't waste. It's another product Romans find uses for. Gloios is what they call this substance, and it's collected and sold. Athletes' gloios, particularly from successful gladiators, is considered especially valuable. People buy it and rub it on their own bodies, believing it transfers some of the athlete's strength and vitality. It's used as a folk remedy for various ailments, applied to sore muscles and injuries. The logic is sympathetic magic mixed with early medical theory. If this substance came from a strong body, surely it contains some essence of that strength. You're watching economic activity built around the bodily excretions of sweaty athletes, and Romans see nothing strange about it. Here's a quirky detail that brings the bathhouse to life. Strigils were such personal items that wealthy Romans brought their own, often made of bronze or even silver, decorated with intricate patterns or family crests. These custom strigils were status symbols, displayed in the bathing room for others to see and admire. Less wealthy people used the house strigils provided by the bathhouse, simpler iron versions that did the job without the flourish. Slaves, when they bathed at all, often had to share strigils or make do with rough cloths. The strigil you owned said something about who you were, like carrying a designer handbag or wearing an expensive watch. The strigiling process requires either flexibility you probably don't have or assistance from someone else. You can manage your own arms and legs, maybe your chest and stomach, but your back is impossible to reach properly. This is why bathing is a social activity. You need someone to strigil your back, and you provide the same service in return. Wealthy Romans bring slaves for this purpose, but ordinary citizens help each other, creating bonds of reciprocity and friendship through this intimate service. You're literally scraping dirt off each other's bodies, and this shared vulnerability, this mutual dependence, builds social connections in ways that your private, locked-door bathing habits never could. The strigil doesn't get you clean in the way you understand cleanliness. There's no antibacterial action, no deep pore cleansing, no pH-balanced formula protecting your skin's microbiome. What it does is remove visible dirt and the feeling of greasiness that accumulates through the day. Romans emerge from this process feeling refreshed, their skin smooth and glowing from the oil, the dead skin cells scraped away. They smell like olive oil rather than sweat, which they consider a significant improvement. Whether they're actually cleaner by microbial standards is debatable, but they feel clean, and in a world without germ theory, that's what matters. The oil used in bathing is a significant expense, even in an empire where olive oil is relatively abundant. The bathhouses go through enormous quantities. Some estimates suggest the large therma consumed several tons of oil per day. This oil had to be transported from olive-growing regions, stored properly, and distributed throughout the facility. The logistics of keeping a major bathhouse supplied with oil, firewood for heating, water from the aqueducts, and all the other necessities employed dozens of workers and represented a massive investment. That emperors provided this service cheaply or free to citizens was a form of wealth redistribution that kept the population content and loyal. You're drying off now with a linen cloth, your skin still slightly oily despite the striduling, and you're preparing to apply more oil, scented this time, perfumed with various aromatics. The cycle continues, oil on, oil scraped off, more oil applied. Roman skin is never truly free of oil, and this constant coating serves multiple purposes. It protects against sun and wind, keeps skin supple in a dry Mediterranean climate, and provides a base for the perfumes that are about to envelope you. The modern obsession with being completely clean, stripped of all oils and residues, would mystify Romans. Why would you want to remove your skin's protection? Why leave yourself exposed and vulnerable when oil provides such elegant armour? You're standing in front of a Roman mirror, polished bronze that shows a wavering, slightly distorted reflection, and you're about to clean your teeth using a method that will make you grateful for modern toothpaste. The slave beside you is grinding ingredients in a small mortar, charcoal for whitening, crushed bones for abrasiveness, and powdered pumice stone for extra scrubbing power. She adds a pinch of salt, a few drops of vinegar, and then, because Romans never do anything halfway, she reaches for a vial of imported Portuguese urine. Yes, you're back to the urine again, because apparently the Romans decided that if it works for whitening togas and bleaching teeth from the outside via mouthwash, it might as well be an ingredient in tooth powder too. The resulting paste is gritty, sour, and probably tastes like regret mixed with volcanic rock. But you rub it on your teeth using your finger or a small cloth. There are no toothbrushes, not in the sense you'd recognise. Those won't be widely used for over 1,000 years. Some Romans use frayed sticks to clean between their teeth, essentially creating disposable wooden brushes by chewing the end of a twig until the fibres separate. These sticks, usually made from aromatic woods like cinnamon or mastic tree, at least leave your mouth smelling better than the tooth powder does. You scrub vigorously, feeling the pumice stone grinding against your enamel, slowly wearing away the surface layer of your teeth along with any stains or food particles. This is mainstream historical fact. Romans cared deeply about dental hygiene and oral health, even if their methods were harsh by modern standards. Dental pain was common and agonizing in an era before antibiotics or proper dentistry, so preventing problems was crucial. Clean teeth were also a mark of social status. Yellow teeth indicated someone who couldn't afford proper dental care, while bright white teeth suggested wealth and access to the best cleaning products. The poet Martial writes mockingly about people with unnaturally white teeth, suggesting they've been using too much urine, but he also praises others whose gleaming smiles enhance their beauty. Romans were caught in the same contradiction you face, wanting perfect teeth while being suspicious of anyone whose teeth are too perfect. Historians still argue about how effective these tooth-cleaning methods actually were. The abrasive ingredients certainly removed stains and plaque, but they also wore down tooth enamel over time, leaving Romans vulnerable to cavities and sensitivity. The charcoal and crushed bones provided carbon and calcium, which might have had some minimal remineralizing effect, but nothing like modern fluoride treatments. The urine's ammonia was genuinely antibacterial, though at the cost of exposing the mouth to whatever other substances urine contains. Overall, Romans probably had somewhat cleaner teeth than their predecessors, but suffered from the long-term effects of their aggressive cleaning methods. Here's a quirky detail that makes Roman dental care even stranger. Some tooth powders included ingredients meant to perfume the breath rather than clean the teeth. Ground rose petals, cinnamon bark, myrrh, and other aromatics were mixed into the paste, creating a product that was part dentifrice and part breath freshener. The idea was that the cleaning and the perfuming could happen simultaneously, saving time in an already lengthy morning routine. Some recipes include dozens of ingredients, each supposedly contributing some specific benefit. Iris root for whitening, nard for smell, honey for taste, wine for astringency. These complex formulations were status symbols themselves, proof that you could afford exotic imports and specialized preparations. Dental problems, despite all this attention to oral hygiene, were extremely common. Cavities, abscesses, and tooth loss plagued Romans of all social classes. The wealthy could afford gold wire to bind loose teeth, or even rudimentary dental prosthetics. False teeth carved from ivory or bone, held in place with gold bands. These appliances were purely cosmetic. You couldn't eat with them, but they filled the gaps in your smile for social occasions. Regular people just lived with missing teeth, or had rotten teeth pulled by barbers or travelling tooth pullers who set up stalls in marketplaces. The procedure was done without anaesthesia, just strong wine to dull the pain and several people to hold you down while the tooth was wrenched out with pliers. Roman medical texts contain extensive sections on dental care, revealing how seriously they took the subject. Celsus, a medical writer from the 1st century, describes procedures for dealing with loose teeth, recommending that they be cauterized with hot iron to strengthen them. A treatment that probably caused more harm than good, but reflects the desperate measures people would try to avoid losing teeth. Pliny the Elder, appearing once again with his Encyclopedia of Bizarre Remedies, suggests that toothache can be cured by spitting into a frog's mouth and asking the frog to take the pain away. He also recommends wearing the tooth of a mole around your neck as a preventive measure, or rubbing your gums with mice brains. These recommendations sit alongside perfectly sensible advice about rinsing your mouth after meals and avoiding foods that damage teeth. The connection between diet and dental health was partly understood by Romans. They knew that sweet foods could cause problems, though they didn't understand the mechanism of how sugar feeds bacteria that produce acid that erodes enamel. Honey was the primary sweetener, and wealthy Romans who could afford sweets in abundance often had worse teeth than poorer citizens, whose diet consisted mainly of bread, vegetables, and occasional meat. The irony wasn't lost on Roman observers. The same wealth that bought the best tooth powders and dental care also bought the sweets that ruined your teeth in the first place. Breath freshening was an obsession that extended beyond tooth powder and aromatic twigs. Romans chewed on parsley, mint, and anise seeds to perfume their breath, and some carried small boxes of these herbs to chew throughout the day. Before important social occasions, they might rinse their mouths with wine mixed with myrrh or other aromatics. Bad breath was considered not just unpleasant, but actually offensive, a sign of poor character or hidden illness. A poet writes about avoiding a man whose breath was so foul it could wilt flowers and kill small birds, which is probably exaggeration but reflects how seriously Romans took the issue. You finish scrubbing your teeth with the gritty paste and rinse your mouth with water mixed with wine and herbs. Your teeth feel smooth, almost squeaky, though your enamel is slightly thinner than it was yesterday and will be thinner still tomorrow. You'll repeat this process every morning for the rest of your life, slowly grinding away at your teeth in the pursuit of cleanliness and whiteness, never knowing that you're creating the very sensitivity and damage you're trying to prevent. But your smile is bright, your breath is fresh, and by Roman standards you've done everything right. The fact that your teeth will probably start falling out in your 40s is just part of life, nothing to do with your dental care routine. Or so you believe. You're walking through the Forum on the hot afternoon, and before you see the crowd, you smell them, a thick, overwhelming cloud of competing scents that makes your eyes water. There's frankincense from the merchant on your left, rose oil from the woman passing on your right, the sharp tang of myrrh from someone's clothing, and underneath it all, the unmistakable smell of human sweat, unwashed bodies, and the various activities of urban life that no amount of perfume can completely mask. Romans don't wear perfume the way you might dab on cologne. They marinate in it, layer it, use it as both cosmetic and weapon in the constant battle against the reality of living in a city of over 1 million people without modern sanitation or deodorant. The perfume industry in Rome is massive, employing thousands of workers who harvest, process, blend, and sell fragrances from across the empire and beyond. Roses come from Egypt and Syria, where vast fields are dedicated to growing flowers that will be crushed for their oil. Frankincense and myrrh arrive via caravan from Arabia and Somalia, precious resins that cost more by weight than most people earn in a year. Spikenard travels from the Himalayas, cinnamon from distant Ceylon, balsam from Judea. The perfume shops in Rome display these ingredients like jewels, and wealthy customers blend custom scents the way you might work with a personal stylist, creating signature fragrances that announce their presence and identity. The application of perfume is ritualized and excessive by your standards. After bathing and striduling, you apply scented oils all over your body, not just a spray on pulse points, but genuine coating of perfumed unguents that soak into your skin and clothes. Your hair is dressed with pomades that contain aromatic compounds. Your clothes are stored in chests with sachets of dried flowers and spices, absorbing fragrance constantly. Even your shoes might be perfumed, and wealthy Romans sometimes sprinkle scented powders on the floors of their homes so that every step releases a puff of fragrance. The goal is total olfactory transformation, replacing your natural human smell with something crafted, controlled, and expensive. Historians still argue about why Romans use such overwhelming amounts of perfume. The obvious answer is that they're masking body odour in a world without effective deodorants, but it goes deeper than that. Scent was believed to have medical properties. Certain fragrances could balance the humours, ward off disease, even affect your personality and mood. A man might wear martial scents like myrrh and cypress to enhance his courage and strength, while a woman would choose softer florals to emphasise her femininity. The perfume you wore was thought to interact with your natural constitution, creating effects beyond the merely cosmetic. Here's a quirky detail that reveals Roman attitudes towards scent. There are extensive debates in Roman literature about men wearing too much perfume. Moralists complain that excessive perfuming is effeminate, a sign of decadence and moral decay. Real men should smell like men. Sweat, olive oil, maybe a touch of something understated. But as often happens when moralists complain about a practice, their very complaints prove how common it is. Men are absolutely dousing themselves in perfume, wearing elaborate custom blends, spending fortunes on exotic ingredients. The complaints and the practice exist in parallel, neither affecting the other, just as today's fashion critics and fashion victims coexist in their separate worlds. The production process for perfumes reveals the sophistication of Roman chemistry, even if they don't understand the underlying science. You're watching perfume makers extract rosy oil using a method that won't be significantly improved for over 1,000 years. Fresh rose petals are layered with olive oil or animal fat in shallow pans, and the fat absorbs the fragrance from the petals. After a few days, the spent petals are removed and fresh ones added, repeating the process dozens of times until the fat is saturated with scent. This enfleurage technique requires patience, skill, and enormous quantities of flowers. It takes approximately 4 tons of rose petals to produce 1 kilogram of rose oil, which explains why perfume is so expensive. The really peculiar ingredients in Roman perfume are the animal products: musk from the glands of Asian deer, ambergris from the intestines of whales, civet from the anal glands of civet cats, castoreum from beaver scent glands. These animal secretions form the base notes of many Roman perfumes, providing depth and longevity that plant materials alone can't achieve. The Romans don't know why these substances work, They just know through experience that a perfume with musk lasts longer and smells richer than one without. Modern chemistry has revealed that these animal products contain complex molecules that slow the evaporation of more volatile scent compounds. But Romans figured out the effect through trial and error, creating sophisticated fragrances based on empirical observation rather than theory. Perfume in Rome isn't just for the living, it's used abundantly in funeral rites and religious ceremonies. When a wealthy Roman dies, their body is anointed with perfumed oils and surrounded by burning incense. The funeral pyre is built with aromatic woods, and the smoke carries the scent of myrrh and frankincense skyward with the soul. Some funerals involve such quantities of expensive aromatics that critics complain about the waste, but the families consider it a necessary expense, a final demonstration of status and respect. The Emperor Nero supposedly burned a year's worth of Arabia's cinnamon production at his wife's funeral, an act of grief and extravagance so extreme it became legendary. Religious rituals are equally perfumed. Temples reek of incense, and priests anoint cult statues with oils. Worshippers bring perfumes as offerings, pouring them over altars or mixing them with wine for libations. The gods apparently appreciate fine fragrances as much as humans do, and the more expensive the offering, the more attention you're likely to receive. This religious use of perfume creates constant demand that keeps prices high and the industry thriving. Some economists argue that Rome's perfume obsession represented a significant drain on the empire's gold reserves, since many aromatic ingredients had to be imported and paid for in precious metals. The relationship between smell and memory was understood by Romans, even if they couldn't explain the neuroscience. You notice that certain scents trigger powerful recollections. The smell of a particular oil reminds you of a childhood visit to the bathhouse, or a specific incense brings back memories of a festival. Romans exploit this, deliberately choosing fragrances associated with positive experiences or desired outcomes. A courtesan might wear the same signature scent always, creating an olfactory brand that clients remember and seek out. A politician might perfume himself with fragrances associated with military victories, subtly reminding voters of Roman glory. You're back in your bedroom now, applying the final layer of scent before heading out for the evening. Your skin gleams with perfumed oil, your hair is slick with aromatic pomade, your clothes release small puffs of fragrance with every movement. You smell, by Roman standards, absolutely wonderful, like a walking garden, an ambulatory spice market, a human embodiment of luxury and refinement. By your modern standards, you'd probably be overwhelming, too strong, the olfactory equivalent of someone shouting in a quiet room. But in Rome, in this time and place, you're exactly right. Properly perfumed, ready to take your place among the scented crowds of the empire's capital. You're sitting in a physician's consulting room, and he's explaining your illness using a theory that will dominate medical thinking for over 1,500 years. Your body, he tells you, contains 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and these fluids must remain in perfect balance for you to stay healthy. Right now, he's diagnosed you with an excess of phlegm, which he says explains your runny nose, pale complexion, and sluggish temperament. The treatment he prescribes involves specific hygiene practices designed to warm and dry your body, rebalancing the humours back to their proper proportions. You're about to learn that Roman hygiene isn't just about getting clean, it's intimately connected to their entire understanding of health, disease, and the functioning of the human body. The theory of the 4 humours, inherited from Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, shapes every aspect of Roman medical practice and daily hygiene routines. Each humour is associated with specific qualities. Blood is hot and moist, phlegm is cold and moist, yellow bile is hot and dry, black bile is cold and dry. These humours are thought to be produced by different organs and circulated throughout the body, and your personal balance of humours determines not just your health, but your personality, your appearance, even your destiny. A sanguine person has excess blood and is cheerful, ruddy-faced, and robust. A phlegmatic person has too much phlegm and is calm, pale, and possibly lazy. Choleric people burn with yellow bile, making them ambitious and quick-tempered. Melancholic individuals suffer from black bile, leading to sadness, creativity, and dark moods. Your hygiene practices must be tailored to your humoral constitution. If you're naturally phlegmatic, like the physician has determined, you should avoid cold baths, which would increase the cold, moist qualities already dominating your body. Instead, you need hot baths, vigorous exercise to generate heat, and foods classified as warm and dry: wine, onions, pepper. Your bathing routine isn't just about cleanliness, it's therapeutic intervention designed to shift your internal balance. This explains why Romans are so particular about the temperature progression in the bathhouse. It's not random preference but deliberate medical practice, moving from warm to hot to cold in patterns believed to affect the humours beneficially. Historians still argue about how seriously ordinary Romans took humoral theory versus how much it remained the domain of educated physicians and philosophers. The archaeological evidence suggests that common people definitely had some understanding of humoral concepts. Medical instruments, prescriptions scratched on pottery, and graffiti references all indicate widespread familiarity with the basics. But whether a farmer in Gaul thought deeply about his yellow bile while bathing is debatable. What's certain is that the theory provided a framework for thinking about hygiene that connected daily practices to larger questions of health and well-being. Here's a quirky detail that shows humoral thinking in action. Physicians prescribe different oils for bathing based on your humoral balance. If you're too cold and moist, you need warming oils like cinnamon and pepper. If you're too hot and dry, cooling oils like rose and violet are recommended. The oil you scraped off with your strigil wasn't just cleaning agent, it was medicine, carefully chosen to nudge your humours in the right direction. Wealthy Romans consulted with physicians about their bathing oils the way you might consult a nutritionist about your diet, seeking personalised recommendations based on their constitution and current health status. Bloodletting represents the most dramatic intersection of hygiene practices and humoral theory. If you have too much blood, and Roman doctors think almost everyone has too much blood, the solution is to remove some. You visit the barber surgeon, who makes small incisions in your arm and lets blood flow into a bowl until he judges you've released enough. Sometimes leeches are used instead, attached to your skin where they suck away the excess. This is considered a normal part of maintaining health, like getting a haircut or trimming your nails. Many Romans schedule regular bloodletting sessions, believing that periodic reduction of blood keeps their humours balanced and prevents disease. The practice is so common that public bathhouses often have bloodletting facilities attached, allowing you to bathe and be bled in the same visit. Sweating is another humour balancing technique integrated into hygiene routines. The hot rooms in the bathhouse don't just feel good, they're believed to help your body expel excess moisture and harmful vapours through your skin. Prolonged sweating is prescribed for all sorts of ailments, based on the theory that heat opens your pores and allows bad humours to escape. This partly explains why Romans spend so much time in the caldarium, despite the uncomfortable heat. They're not just bathing, they're conducting medical therapy, literally sweating out their illnesses. The same logic applies to exercise before bathing. Working up a sweat prepares your body to release impurities. The concept of contagion exists in Roman medicine, but it's understood through humoral theory rather than germ theory. Diseases can spread, but not through invisible microorganisms, rather through corrupt air or vapours that disrupt the humoral balance of people who breathe them. This is why perfume and incense are considered medically important, not just cosmetically pleasant. Strong fragrances are thought to purify the air, driving away the corrupt vapours that cause disease. When plague strikes Rome, the wealthy retreat to their perfumed villas and burn aromatic woods constantly, believing the scents will protect them. This isn't just superstition by Roman standards, it's sound medical practice based on the best scientific understanding available. Diet and hygiene are inseparable in humoral thinking. The physician examining you doesn't just ask about your bathing habits. He wants to know what you've been eating because food directly affects your humoral balance. Cold, moist foods like fish and cucumber need to be balanced with hot, dry foods like roasted meat and wine. If you've been eating too much of one type, your hygiene routine needs to compensate, using appropriately warming or cooling baths and oils. Some physicians provide clients with elaborate charts showing which foods, baths, exercises, and oils should be combined based on the season, your age, your natural constitution, and your current health status. The humoral framework explains some hygiene practices that otherwise seem arbitrary. Why do Romans insist on the specific sequence of warm, hot, and cold baths? Because moving from one temperature extreme to another too quickly is thought to shock the humours, potentially causing dangerous imbalances. The gradual progression allows your humours to adjust safely. Why is moderate exercise before bathing so important? Because vigorous movement heats the blood and makes it flow faster, preparing your body to benefit from the subsequent bathing routine. Why are certain people advised to bathe more or less frequently? Because bathing frequency should match your constitutional needs. Someone naturally hot and dry shouldn't bathe as often as someone cold and moist, since water increases moisture. You're receiving your treatment plan now, and it's comprehensive. Daily hot baths with warming oils, vigorous exercise, a diet emphasizing hot and dry foods, regular bloodletting to reduce excess phlegm, and specific herbal treatments to drink and apply to your skin. The physician is confident that this regimen will restore your humoral balance within weeks. Whether it actually helps is almost beside the point. You believe it will work because it's based on the authoritative medical theory of the age, and your belief itself might provide some benefit through what modern medicine would call the placebo effect. The elaborate hygiene rituals you'll follow aren't empty superstition. They're the practical application of Roman medical science, flawed by modern standards but internally consistent and based on centuries of accumulated observation. You're standing at the edge of the present now, looking back across 2,000 years at the strange, fascinating, sometimes horrifying hygiene practices of ancient Rome. And you're beginning to understand something important. These people weren't primitive or ignorant. They were doing the best they could with the knowledge available to them, creating systems and rituals that made sense within their understanding of the world. The shared toilet sponges, the urine collected in jars, the lead makeup slowly poisoning wealthy women, the tooth powder that ground away enamel. All of it was rational behaviour based on Roman logic, Roman science, Roman culture. They would look at your practices with equal bewilderment, wondering why you waste clean water to flush away waste, why you isolate yourself in locked bathroom stalls, why you refuse to share resources that could serve many people. The legacy of Roman hygiene lives on in unexpected places. When you visit a modern spa and move from sauna to cold plunge, you're following the Roman bathing progression, the same therapeutic sequence they believed balanced the humours. When cities build elaborate sewer systems and aqueducts to bring fresh water to citizens, they're implementing principles Romans perfected 2 millennia ago. The word lavatory comes from the Latin lavare, to wash. Toilet derives from the French toilette. But the concept of designated sanitation spaces owes much to Roman public latrines. Even the idea that bathing and socialising should be combined lives on in bathhouse cultures around the world, from Japanese onsen to Scandinavian saunas to Turkish hammams, all distant cousins of the Roman thermae. Do you remember walking into that first public latrine shocked by the communal seating and shared sponge? By now, you've travelled through an entire civilization's approach to cleanliness, seeing how Romans washed, perfumed, beautified, and maintained themselves. You've witnessed practices that seem alien and practices that seem strangely modern, sometimes in the same moment. The Romans were people like you, dealing with sweaty bodies, dirty clothes, tooth decay, and the eternal human desire to smell better than we naturally do. Their solutions were different, but the impulse was identical: the universal human drive toward cleanliness, beauty, and social acceptability. Historians still argue about many details of Roman hygiene: the exact protocols for shared sponges, the true extent of lead poisoning from cosmetics, whether mixed-gender bathing was common or scandalous. But what's undeniable is that Romans thought deeply about cleanliness, invested enormous resources in hygiene infrastructure, and created rituals around bathing and bodily maintenance that shaped their entire civilization. The bathhouse wasn't just a place to wash. It was where business happened, where friendships formed, where you proved your Roman-ness by participating in shared cultural practices, refusing to bathe publicly, insisting on privacy, avoiding the social aspects of hygiene. These would mark you as strange, possibly barbaric, certainly not fully Roman. The strangest part of this journey through Roman hygiene might be realizing how arbitrary your own practices are. You've been taught that certain things are obviously right: private bathrooms, personal towels, daily showers, antibacterial everything. But Romans would challenge every one of these assumptions, asking why you need so much privacy, why you waste so much water, why you're so afraid of your own body and other people's bodies. Neither perspective is objectively correct. They're cultural constructions, systems of meaning built on different foundations. Romans built theirs on communal values, humoral theory, and engineering prowess. You've built yours on germ theory, individualism, and unlimited access to clean water. Both systems work, more or less, at keeping people reasonably clean and healthy. As you drift further into sleep, let the images of ancient Rome grow softer, the marble bathhouses fading into gentle mist, the sounds of scraping strigils and splashing water becoming distant echoes. Those Romans going about their daily washing, sitting side by side on toilet seats, scraping oil from each other's backs, coating themselves in perfumes made from flowers and whale intestines. They're sleeping too now, all of them, gone for 2,000 years, their bathing rituals preserved only in archaeological remains and written records. But for a little while tonight, you walked among them, experienced their world, understood their logic, and maybe learned something about the strangeness of your own normal. The Hipparchus fires have burned down to embers. The last bathhouse attendants are sweeping the floors and draining the pools. The urine collection jars stand silent in the darkened streets. The perfume shops have closed their shutters. The physicians have finished their final consultations about balancing humours. Rome is settling into night, and so are you. Comfortable in your bed, clean by your own culture's standards, with your private bathroom just steps away and your personal towel hanging unused for the moment. You don't need to share a sponge or scrape yourself with metal or soak in communal pools with strangers. You have different rituals, different routines, different standards of cleanliness. But the basic human need that drove Romans to build their magnificent bathhouses, the desire to feel clean, to be accepted, to care for the body you live in, that need is identical. Let yourself float now on warm bathhouse waters that exist only in imagination. Let the scent of ancient perfumes mix with whatever fragrance is in your bedroom. Let the distinction between their time and yours blur into irrelevance. The Romans solved the eternal problems of human hygiene in their way, and you solve them in yours. And 2,000 years from now, people might look back at your practices with the same mixture of fascination and revulsion that you felt tonight. They'll wonder why you did things the way you did, just as you've wondered about the Romans. And they'll be doing whatever future humans do to stay clean, thinking their methods are obviously correct, never imagining that someday others will look back and find them equally strange. Sleep well, knowing that humans have always struggled with the same basic challenges: dirty bodies, social expectations, the gap between how we are and how we'd like to be. The Romans met those challenges with communal sponges and collected urine and lead face powder and olive oil scrapers, and somehow they built one of history's greatest civilizations. You meet them with antibacterial soap and private bathrooms and fluoride toothpaste, and you're doing fine too. Different solutions, same humanity, reaching across the centuries to remind you that being human has always been a little bit messy, a little bit strange, and entirely normal. The strange hygiene secrets of ancient Rome aren't really about Rome at all. They're about us, about the endless human project of trying to be clean in a dirty world, trying to be acceptable in a judging society, trying to take care of these temporary bodies we've been given for our brief time on Earth. Rest now. The ancients have shared their secrets, and you can carry them into your dreams,